Hello. I am giving the final two videos over to some final generic thoughts on Greek history and reflections on what we have looked at and learned. And these are principles that I would teach to any group of students anywhere I go and anywhere that I am at. So, what does Greek history demonstrate and show in many ways? Well, one interesting thing about Greek history is that it began with the people under the rule of a strong central government and ended with the rule of a strong central government. Now, when some of us hear the term central government, we may think, well, that's good, centralized government, everything is running smoothly and operating precisely. But in many ways, central governments are governments that deny people rights and fundamental liberties. The Mycenaean the citadel culture does not appear to have been geared towards the support of the people in general, but rather devoted to its own existence. And with the grain silos and the reservoirs that we've seen in the Mycenaean citadel cities, there is a lot to say that the people were under a very significant burden and that a lot of their produce and the work of their hands was given over to a fairly small group of people and that they were left with very little. Now, this may have in some ways been redistributed, but we cannot say for sure. Nor can we say that it was redistributed in an equal and precise fashion. There's just nothing there. We also know that education was not for the people in general, but was directed for the support of the state and support of the state only. Now, between the two periods of central government, so Mycenae and life under the Macedonian leadership of Philip II and Alexander, there was a real blossom and real strong production in the cultural and the cultural expression of the Greeks and in how they appeared. We saw a lot of progress at the end of the Dark Age, and then for several centuries they really flourished and blossomed. Literature, philosophy, science, mathematics, all of these things came in a time period that was between these oppressive governments. As I just said, the process of developing strong independent city-states took a period of centuries and resulted in developments in religion, philosophy, science, and government that remain with us today. And the slide from democracy to a return of autocracy only took 80 years. Actually, a little bit less because, we had the Athenian Empire develop out of the First Maritime League, and that was an empire. That was broken. Then there was a time of non-leadership, really, and fluid leadership throughout the Greek world. And then we had the reimposition of a strong government from Macedon, which was a foreign government. So it wasn't even Greek, it was Macedonian, and the Macedonians were never considered to be a part of the Greeks, even though the Macedonians had some cultural resonance and affiliation with the Greeks. They were not officially a part of them, even ethnically. And so the slide from democracy and the slide from leadership began right after the Persian Wars we saw, and really was made firm and was not relieved for a very long period of time after that. U.S. President Ronald Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We didn't pass it on, and we didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. And the Greeks did not support their freedom because they gave it away in an emergency and never fought to take it back. Only Naxos fought to support freedom, to exit from the First Maritime League. The rest just kind of meekly surrendered and quickly, just very quickly after they just surrendered and said, all right, we're not going to challenge Athenian hegemony and essentially empire control. So it was a very rapid transition, as I said, and that's something that we need to be constantly looking on the horizon for. Again, these lessons are never just lessons in isolation. History has application. Greek history is important because, and many of you may be wondering, why did we do this? Is it really important? Well, Greek history is important because it serves as the basis of democracy and forms of government based on that model: republic, parliamentary, pure democracy, and many others. If you understand how something originated and how it worked in the beginning, then you can understand where it goes wrong. A mechanic, when he is looking at his engine, he doesn't learn engines by correcting faults. He learns engines by studying the real thing, the working engine. He knows how it should function. So therefore, when he hears something wrong, when there's a little click in the system, when there's a spark or something, or when the car is not driving strongly, he knows there's a problem. So as history teaches us to be like mechanics. When we learn how the system works, how it developed, why it developed, then we can understand and diagnose where it's going wrong. And that is applicable to our own individual lives. It can be applicable to our jobs. It can be applicable to events that surround us. Also, it's important because Western society is still heavily influenced in its educational structure, in its outlook in terms of Stoicism, Platonic ideas, and basic Aristotelian model of the universe, and Pythagorean mathematics. All of these ideas are still floating around in Western culture. There's still a lot of very Greek ways of understanding the universe. There's a very predominant Greek, even Roman, but more Greek approach to life. And you may be increasingly and more often in contact with Western society or in societies who are in more contact with it than you are. And knowing how to deal with it and knowing how to approach it is very important. Greek literature, the Odyssey and Iliad, continue to be referenced in contemporary culture. There are many, many examples, but movies influenced or directly based on the stories would include O Brother, Where Art Thou?, Troy. There are references in cartoons such as The Simpsons, The Family Guy, and other references in short films or shows. They do crop up, they do come around. And the Greeks really cornered the market on storylines. It is said that there are only 32 basic plot lines that any story, any work of fiction can adhere to. Only 32. So if you feel like you've gone to the movie theater and you've seen that movie before, you have, because there are only 32 basic plot lines that you can pull out of any situation. You might have micro variations, but that 32 remains consistent. Now, the Greeks were prodigious, or great producers of plays and literature. So their myths, as well as their plays, really created and stabilized those 32 plot lines. And if you look at the plays of the ancient Greeks, even more than the Romans, because the Romans basically went to the Greeks and they saw what they had written and said, yeah, we'll just change the titles or we'll change some of the characters and hey, look, it's all new. But it was still all Greek to them and all Greek to us. And Greek events continue to inspire movies, for better or for worse. 300 Rise of an Empire, The 300 Spartans, Clash of the Titans, more of the original 1982 version than the one with, what's his face? I can see it right now, but he was the guy who was supposed to be the new It guy for Hollywood, and he just kind of burned out after a few movies. But anyway, the point is that Greek mythology and historical events continue to inspire movies and literature. And as I said before, just down here encapsulated, Asian societies need to understand Western mentalities and culture in order to properly work with, interact, and cooperate with their Western partners. For some of you in the future, you may be looking at going on to a Western university, and that could be in Europe, that could be in America. And just understand that you're going to encounter many ideas that if you really focus on Greek culture, you're going to be able to touch back and look at that and say, oh, well, that's a very Greek idea. That was a very Greek way of doing things. That's a very Greek story. Oh, we're doing a play and it's based on Troy or some aspect of the Iliad. Even basic studies that you will be required to take, they have what are called core classes that you are required to take. And you're going to encounter Greek history once again. And so having this level of background understanding of it and knowledge of it is going to greatly enhance what more you learn and might actually give you a better basic understanding of future pursuits for your life. All right, well, thank you. We have one more video to go, and then you'll be free for the summer.